Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. I can't see you because of the lights, but I am aware that you are out there. So, as we get started, there are two things I should tell you about myself. Number one, with a name like Rusty and with this accent, I could only be American, but I have lived in the UK for almost 30 years, so I feel more at home here in Europe than I do back in the United States. And secondly, I have done a lot of work with companies in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, so I probably know many of your brands and have worked with some of you, maybe even directly, but if not directly, then with some of your colleagues. And as the Masters of Ceremony said, we're going to talk about the future of customer-obsessed marketing. And I'd like to start with what most of the conversations I have with marketers look like when we talk about technology. And of course, this is a lighthearted view, but it's very easy, I think, for marketers to get distracted by what I would call the shiny objects, where there's AI or virtual reality or whatever. I'm usually like that person that you see at the bottom of this cartoon who's putting my hand up saying, shouldn't we talk about our strategy first? Now, I was in New York last September and I met Tom Fishburne, the marketunist, and we talked about this cartoon. And he admitted that he had drawn this cartoon a couple of years ago, but if he were doing it again today, that final panel would once again say AI. It would just be generative AI. Now, I think it's dangerous to get distracted by shiny objects because, as you heard already in the introduction, strategy is important to guide all of our technology investments. And that's true because we see MarTech spending on the rise. There was a bit of a dip during the pandemic, of course. 2023 was an interesting year because there was a lot of uncertainty. But in 2024, we see that budgets for MarTech are again going up. So there's a lot of technology spending. But if you don't put that technology to good use to support a strategy that has been defined, you might find that the technology actually works against you and you don't get a lot of value out of those investments. So we will talk briefly about AI, because AI will obviously accelerate change, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Instead, I would just like to look at today, the midterm, and then the future for AI. And we saw some of this yesterday. In fact, in Penny's keynote, you saw what generative AI can do in terms of creative production. And then you also heard from Shai what we'll see in terms of a more conversational interface that will make it easier for business people to get access to the insights that they need in order to execute against their strategy. All of that together, I think, will result in what Penny talked about yesterday, where there will be the positionless marketer, where you're able to do more because you have access to technology that will support what you're trying to accomplish. But long term is where it gets really exciting, because long term, that artificial intelligence won't just be for people behind the scenes working inside a brand. It will be available to all of us as consumers. And because of that, I think we're going to see dramatic change in the way all of us engage using digital channels. And that will mean that marketing isn't just going to use AI to do the things that you've always done. You're going to be doing completely new things, leveraging AI and using it in a way that helps you engage better with consumers. As you do that, you should remember, of course, that AI is not just one thing. AI is going to apply to many different use cases. And you can think about some of those as being predictive. Others will be more on the generative side. You can also think of some of them as being collaborative. There will be a human in the loop out of necessity. In other cases, it might be more autonomous, where we can entrust the AI in order to execute some things with some guardrails. As you're doing that, of course, remember, data is going to be the most critical ingredient into that recipe. You will also, of course, need to think about how you monitor the outputs, how you measure the results, and you'll need to keep an eye on privacy and security because there will be a lot of sensitive consumer data that may potentially be exposed to some of the models and algorithms that we're going to run. So now that's it. That's my entire AI pitch in 2 slides because I don't want any of you to get distracted by shiny objects. And instead, I'd like to focus on your customer strategy. At Forrester, we would say your customer strategy should be one of customer obsession. And I know as soon as those words leave my mouth, it sounds like a bit of hyperbole. It sounds like something that Gartner or Forrester would come up with, and we sit there in our ivory tower and we tell you what you should be doing. Well, in this case, we've built an entire operating model around customer obsession. And it's more than just a tagline for your annual report. It is something that begins with your leadership, it permeates your strategy, and it shows up in your operational environment where you will be customer-led in all of your decision-making. And you become faster. Notice we've accelerated the little fast. That's on purpose because we think that with this focus on the customer and the customer needs, the organization will need to move faster and in many cases leverage technology so that they can move faster. So if we think of customer obsession and then we think of MarTech, how do we bring the two together? Well, I sat down with the people at Forrester who created the customer obsession operating model, and we agreed that marketing has a critical role to play in a company that will be customer obsessed. And we discussed all the different responsibilities a marketer might have, and we boiled it down to just 3. We decided that it's most important for marketers to understand their customers, then build a strategy based on that customer understanding, and then finally deliver experiences every day that live up to the promise of that strategy. Now, you could argue that there's many other things marketers do every day, but if we think of those 3 as the critical activities, we can then begin to map that to a strategy for our MarTech investments. And we do that by looking at customer understanding and map it to our investments in customer data management and customer analytics. Fairly straightforward, I think. We then look at the experience side, and there will need to be our marketing automation platforms or maybe CRM or other automation systems. And then, of course, all of those tools and solutions that we would use to bring to life the different channels and touch points. The one of these that was most difficult was customer strategy. And that's because many people think of strategy as a concept. It's ethereal. It's not supported by technology, right? I decided wrong because I think your strategy very much needs technology. You have all of those planning and budgeting and collaboration tools, all of your creative production, your digital asset management, all of those directly support the definition and execution of your strategy. Similarly, all of those reports and dashboards that you use for measurement to optimize what you're doing as a brand, those would all be in support of your strategy. So technology applies across the board here. Now, this is a very straightforward version of this work, I have to warn you. There are those 6 boxes on the right-hand side. In reality, there are more than 100 technologies that might fit into a MarTech reference model. But we didn't want to overwhelm you by putting all of those here on the screen. But if you can think about the way all of your technology investments support either customer understanding, the way you define, execute, and measure your strategy, or the way you deliver experiences, I think it will bring a lot of structure and sense to the way you think about those investments. And even though there are more than 100 technologies you have to worry about, if you do it that way, I think it will be a lot more straightforward than just looking at the market at large. Because as I'm sure you know, there are thousands of vendors out there, literally, And all of their messages will sound a little bit alike unless they're differentiated, like Optimove, of course. But they will all be trying to sell you capabilities. And without some sense of how you're going to put your budget to work in order to buy technology that will support your strategy, it could end up as a paint-by-numbers kind of exercise. As you are investing in your technology, remember that you won't get everything from one single vendor. You could buy everything with an Opti brand in front of it, and you would still need some other components across your ecosystem. You could even go out and buy everything in a big portfolio from Adobe or Salesforce. It wouldn't be complete because MarTech is more complex than that. So I would urge you to focus on the data and the analytics and content that you need to support your strategy, and then you can look at the additional capabilities that might bring your ecosystem to life. Perhaps you'll need more analytics or some AI capability. Maybe your business lives or dies based on your mobile app, and so you will invest a lot more on the mobile side than another brand might do. No matter where you fall in this equation, integration is going to be the #1 thing you should look for when you are evaluating tools. And we hear that again and again from both marketing teams and the technology teams that support marketing, where we need to think about the way these tools fit together and integrate into an ecosystem. In fact, one of our predictions for 2024 is that there will be even more focus on integration. The days of marketers just using their operating budgets to purchase software as a service and just keep doing that for anything they think they might need, those days are over, especially if you're a large organization where you need to think about the data strategy and the adoption of AI moving forward in order to serve your customers. So we think IT and marketing are going to collaborate a lot more than they ever have, and that we will see this ecosystem approach. You might notice some language on this slide, which I'm very happy about because I've only been saying it since 2014. The marketing cloud was always a myth. I was never going to be able to license software in a cloud and it was going to fulfill everything that marketing needs to accomplish. And we've now seen the industry, I think, realize that and take much more of an ecosystem approach. AI will have a role to play here. Generative AI, of course, doesn't just generate nice slides, it will also generate code. And we will see Gen AI used to generate the connective tissue to bring some of these components together. We will also see vendors like Optimove offer you services in addition to their technology to help you put these pieces together to get more value out of them in an ecosystem. And then infrastructure players will also be important. You may have noticed down in the expo that we have InfoBip and others there. I think companies like that are going to play a very important role when it comes to connecting to mobile infrastructures and communications infrastructures, or helping with the development necessary to make sure that you're not just sending messages to people on WhatsApp, but WhatsApp is integrated deeply into your customer strategy. So lots more integration to come. And the reason that integration is so important is your customers will interact with you across many, many moments if you get it right. We tend to think of a customer experience as what happens when I'm there in a particular session, but in reality, customer experience is more holistic. It's the overall perception the customer has from working with you as a brand across all of these different moments. And I think you probably have realized that that does indeed require an ecosystem as opposed to a single platform. Those moments themselves are going to get more and more complex because we have lots of technology coming to market at the glass. I'm sure I have an old mobile, I will admit. Mine's only an iPhone 11, so it's old. You probably have much more modern devices in your pockets, but there will be lots of hardware and software on a device that will completely revolutionize the way we engage with brands. We're not going to talk about that today because that's a whole area on its own. But under the glass, there's a lot you can do with data and analytics in order to better serve your customers, regardless of what that interface might look like on a mobile device. So we're going to talk about that. One of the things I do at Forrester is I cover an area called real-time interaction management, which is basically making the best decision about the next best experience for an individual customer. And it's complex. Again, you can see the ecosystem idea coming through here. This means that I'm able to pick up on all of the customer interactions, regardless of the touch point. I'm able to recognize that customer and their needs. I put the current situation into context by merging that with all the historical information I have. I then make a decision, which will be part analytics and part business logic. I then orchestrate that through the appropriate touch points. And all the while I'm doing that, I'm collecting data so that I can continuously optimize. And I will want to optimize what I'm doing with an individual customer in the moment. I'll need to optimize what I am going to do with that customer over time. And I will need to collectively, holistically use those insights to optimize my strategy so that it's not only good for all of my customers, but it's good for us as a brand. I said next best experience a couple of times. And next best experience is an aspiration for most organizations that I talk to. Companies are very good at next best product, which is a product recommendation, or even next best offer. And I see a lot of companies that are focused on next best action. But all three of those, next best product, next best offer, next best action, are from the inside out. It's what the brand would like to happen. I want to sell you a product. I want you to accept my offer. I want you to take an action. Next best experience flips that around. It's from the outside in. What would be the next best thing for this customer, which might not always be a product sale? So to give you an example of that, this happens to be a banking example, but I think you can apply it to any vertical. If I go to a bank's website and I have a play around with the mortgage calculator, chances are that bank will pick up on that and they will serve me a product offer in an ad for mortgages, very generic. If I put in some of my personal details and information, the bank might realize that I'm a first-time buyer and they might actually make me a more tailored offer for a first-time mortgage. If I start to fill in the application and I abandon it, either I get distracted or I run into difficulty or I need to go look for a piece of data to put into the form, the bank might prompt me to complete the application. But again, in all of those cases, those are things that are good for the bank. They have offered me a mortgage. They've made me a specific mortgage offer. They're getting me to complete the application. On the other hand, if the bank realizes that I have concerns or I have questions, maybe I'm not even financially literate to understand the difference between a repayment mortgage and an interest-only mortgage, the bank can pick up on that and provide me with advice and education and information so that I can make a more informed decision. They might not sell the mortgage today, but they will do the right thing for me in terms of me moving forward in my journey looking at mortgage products. And all of you will need to think about that as marketers. And you'll need to accomplish everything which is here on this particular graphic. I know when you look at that, it looks like a maturity model or a maturity curve. It's not. This is not saying that campaigns are bad and context is better and moments are best. What it's saying to you is you need to do all of this. There will be times when an outbound campaign with a product or an offer is the right thing to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But that can't be the only thing that you do. You have to be prepared when the customer is coming to you to respond in an appropriate way, to be relevant, to use the contextual information provided to not give them a generic campaign on email. And then for a subset of your customers, you can be more anticipatory. And that will be a subset of your customers. How many? That will vary by every organization. But there will be some of your customers who are willing to share information with you in a way that makes it possible for you to run models, predict what they might need, and be there at that moment of need. But that will be up at the top of the spectrum. But I would caution you to remember, you cannot deliver value. And I will say that again because it probably flies in the face of everything you've ever been taught as a marketer. You cannot deliver value. You deliver products. You deliver services. Your customers will or won't realize value on their own terms. The customer might feel like they got economic value because they paid the right price for your product. They might get utilitarian value because I bought an umbrella and it kept me dry. They might get experiential value. You might be the marketing team for a hotel chain, and the customer booking the room isn't valuable, but the customer coming and having a good night's sleep is the experiential value that the customer will enjoy. And then, of course, there's symbolic value. I might like to wear certain labels because they make me feel good or confident, or possibly I will only buy from brands who share my values as a human. So your customers will realize value on their own terms. You cannot deliver it. You can, though, help them co-create it. You can become part of a customer's value network. You can be part of how that customer wants to realize value and enable them to do so. And I think that's the big shift we all have to think about. For marketing, part of that shift will be thinking differently about the customer lifecycle. Almost every marketer I talk to is on the left side of this diagram. They're focused on the purchase journey. They're focused on acquisition and conversions. It's all about the ads that drive you to the website so that I can make you an offer. Or it's all about the email that will get you to click and buy something. Again, that's not where your customer will realize value. Booking the hotel room isn't that valuable. Staying in the hotel room is a lot more valuable. So marketing needs to think about how to work with the rest of the organization. Work with your customer experience team, your customer service team, your sales team, your CRM and loyalty people, so that you can impact the way customers realize value as they're using your products and services, or if they have issues and they need some help from the brand. I do find that marketers are catching on to this. This happens to be a very small sample group if you look at the fine print, but these are references for a study that I just did looking at real-time interaction management. And these people told me that their biggest technology challenges are understanding the optimal customer journey and coordinating customer interactions with not only marketing, but with sales and service. And then from a business perspective, it's adjusting the strategy based on real time, based on AI, based on all these new technology capabilities. Marketers are also changing the way they measure. And if you're looking at that and thinking you need a PhD to understand it, you're not far off, but that is a customer lifetime value model. I am willing to bet that many of you think of customer lifetime value as cumulative revenue or historical orders. And quite possibly your MarTech vendors have taught you that's how you should calculate customer lifetime value. Well, I hate to tell you, but you're wrong. That is not customer lifetime value. It is customer lifetime revenue, but not customer lifetime value. The way your CFO thinks of customer lifetime value is more complex, and it's a forward-looking profit contribution model. It is looking at the investments you make over the next 18 months to 3 years to determine if they are appropriate investments, if they align with the strategy, and if they will bring a return for the business. So customer lifetime value, if I break it down from that scientific equation, does consider revenue, but it's forward-looking revenue. It's what I predict we will do. It's also going to take into account retention, but retention across a very specific time period, which is why it's known as survival when you're doing a CLV model. You will factor in not only acquisition costs, but also servicing costs, which is very hard for marketers to do, I know. And you will then apply time and discount rates to give rigor to this model in the face of inflation and currency fluctuations and so forth. That's the way your CFO will think of customer lifetime value. So you need to think about your metrics and how you might apply them to this kind of model. You're going to need to partner with the CFO. In fact, I would say make the CFO, or at least someone close to the CFO, your best friend in the whole world. And you're going to need to work with your data science team to build a model that the organization can agree on. And then you're going to have to use it to track all of your investments accordingly. That's going to be the only way for marketing to look at its investments against profit, not historical revenue, to make sure that they're worthwhile and that they're aligned with the customer strategy. And one more don't before I finish up. Please don't confuse personalization with customer experience. Many marketers are guilty of this. They think that they've used some personalization tactics, or they've put my name in an email and they've done their job. That's not a good experience. That is a tactic, and it's usually an acquisition tactic, and it quite often fails. And I'd like to share with you just a personal example here. Some lovely photographs, right? These are from my own phone, right? I took these photographs when I was in Utah last June. So the Rocky Mountains got a lot of snow last year. It was more than 15 meters. So in June, there was still snow on the ground, and I was in Utah, so I went to Sundance. I took the chairlift on a beautiful sunny day and took some great pictures of the mountains. While I was in Utah, my phone was roaming. I had a flight. I had a rental car. I had a hotel. I even went into a North Face and bought a pair of hiking trousers. So armed with that information, I got this set of ads on my Facebook feed from a retailer in Utah. And trust me, I have no qualms at all about shaming them in this way, because this, if you can believe it, was their Father's Day promotion. Now, my father died many years ago. I don't have kids, and though I did grow up in West Virginia, I have fired hunting rifles. I would never buy a gun, and I certainly couldn't buy a gun in Utah and bring it back with me to the UK. So this was a completely useless ad, and they spent a lot of money on it with Facebook to make it available. They could have said, "Are you in Utah? Would you like some outdoor gear?" and attracted me into their store, telling me they had everything on sale. But they decided to assume that because I have a platinum card and I grew up in West Virginia, that I'm a hillbilly who would go buy a gun. Not the case. Now, I won't finish on that example. We'll give you a good one instead. Nespresso. This is also from my personal experience. I'm a happy Nespresso customer. I drank a lot of coffee during the pandemic. I have 3 Nespresso machines. There's one in my kitchen. There's one beside my desk in the living room, if I'm honest. And then there's one I keep in the cupboard, a small one, which I take with me when I travel in the UK and I go to Airbnb so that I can have Nespresso with me. So I'm a little bit of a fan. I am in the top tier of their loyalty program, but it doesn't matter. Whatever tier of the loyalty program you're in, they do a really good job of letting you know what that involves. For me, as an individual, I like the fact that I can recycle the pods, because even though I love the coffee, if I couldn't do something with those pods, my conscience would get the better of me and I'd probably find another way to have my coffee. But they make it very easy for me to get a recycling bag with my order. They pick it up at my door when I fill the bag with coffee pods and it goes away and it all works. So that's great. They also have found a good way of getting to know their customers. And maybe some of you have also had this promotion because it was a UK-wide thing. But with one of my orders, I got a box of pods, which was a mystery box. It was completely white with question marks on it. And inside there were 7 pods. And there was an invitation from Nespresso to try these coffees and then rate them on the website. And when I went to the website to rate them, I could get some information about the coffees and which ones I liked and which ones I didn't, that kind of thing. But Nespresso took that opportunity to ask me some questions. Do I drink espresso or do I drink Americano? Do I put milk in it? Is it dairy or is it something else? Do I put sweetener in? Is it sugar or is it something else? And just with those few questions, Nespresso was able to start tailoring the recommendations for coffees that I might like. And they did that with my full permission and with my participation because they made it fun and interesting for me. So I would say if you can align your marketing, your commerce, your recycling program, your shipping, your logistics, and you can make it fun, your customers will be more than happy to participate with you, and you can help them co-create that value that we talked about. So I'm going to wrap up with this. I think you heard a lot about scale and sophistication from Optimove, and you certainly need that in your MarTech ecosystem. You will need to be able to understand your customers and orchestrate these experiences at scale across a wide variety of channels. AI will play an important role, and I would look to AI to help me ease that human burden, make me more positionless as a marketer, help me be more able to adjust and adapt to the changes that are no doubt coming when that AI makes it possible for me as a consumer to do something I never dreamed of before just by looking at my phone. And then finally, keep that focus on your customer strategy because it is helping that customer realize value, which will ultimately drive the business value that your CFO and your CEO are looking for. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and attention.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rusty. How cool is this? How great are you? All right. I'd love to ask you a few questions before we wrap up today. You started talking about data at the beginning, and I believe you said it's one of the most critical ingredients, I might get the wording wrong, in the marketer's experience or in the customer delivery experience. And you talked a lot about marketing strategy over kind of the evolution of that. How do you see the marketing strategy and the data strategy as converging today and in the next few years?
Well, that's one of the areas where I think we'll see a lot more collaboration between the marketing teams and other business functions and the IT function. And we hear a lot about that all the time, right? We hear that there's a data warehouse or a data lake or IT has done something with Snowflake, and that is the enterprise data management strategy. And we need to connect into that, right? We need to leverage those insights. And when we're thinking about that, I'd say it's important to think about it as a two-way street because we often think that that data in IT is something we need access to. But there is an exchange that can happen here because marketing quite often is on the leading edge, the front line, if you will, of understanding customers. You have all that browsing behavior to know what customers are interested in. You can help with forecasting. You can help with supply chain. You can help with inventory management. So by working with IT on a data strategy that covers both the back office and the front office, not only will you get insights from the data warehouse or the data lake that you can use to build better audiences, you can provide information back to the business that it can use for all of those business functions that ultimately serve the customers better.
I think it's interesting that, what you're talking about is that correlation between these different teams. I know you touched on this a little bit, and you had a slide where you specifically said this is not a maturity model. But I was thinking, what is the maturity model? Like, what is the marketer here in the room today take with them and start to think about, I want to deliver these experiences like an espresso. I want to personalize. I want to put the customer first. How can I start doing that, even if, I'm not as big as an espresso, let's say?
Yeah, well, I don't think you have to be as big. In fact, in many cases, it's easier if you're not so big, because trust me, if you are Nespresso and you're part of the whole Nestle infrastructure, it's really difficult to get things done and make decisions because everything is via a committee. So being smaller might not be a bad thing in terms of what you want to accomplish. I would say it does begin with that customer understanding. Yesterday, Shai shared a great example where he said that there's an Optimove customer where they have more than 10,000 segments, and some of those segments are as small as 50 people. Now, you can think about that from the inside out, where you're thinking, oh, that's really great for me as a marketer because I can target people and I can put personalization into emails that are very specific to 50 people. I would challenge you to think about it the other way. I would say that actually you have the opportunity to understand how 50 people realize value with your brand. How do they use your products? How do they choose to purchase your products or services? How do they like to engage with the brand? I would say that if marketing, instead of saying to someone in IT or the rest of the business, I'm able to segment and personalize to 50 people out of thousands, which goes right over their head, if you instead said, I understand the unique needs of these 50 people, when taken alone might not mean a lot to our business, but because I'm able to better serve them, here is the profit that brings. Here's the long-term loyalty that brings. Here's the information I can provide to the business about how we can better serve not only that group of 50 customers, but every group of 50 customers. And that just changes the whole conversation.
Yeah, and I think it really grows the scale of it as well. And I'd love to talk a little bit about one of your favorite topics, real time. Obviously, you touched on it a little bit, but we were talking a few weeks ago, and we were talking about real time and these things. And we were also talking about the concept of right time. How has that changed? And where is it going? There were some of us yesterday, we did a roundtable where we were talking about this exact topic, and everyone was sharing the examples and use cases that they have. And I think it came down to that. What does it mean to deliver at the right time? Could you share with us a little bit about how you see that playing a role for the modern marketer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we call our category real-time interaction management, but the definition that I wrote 10 years ago talks about the right time. It's not always scientific real time that's necessary. It's the appropriate time, the appropriate moment, the appropriate channel so that I can give that customer what they're looking for. So I think right time is much more important. And as you were asking the question, Ben, I was reminded of our conversation last night where a big tech company, one of the biggest tech companies in the world, recently said to me, we'd like to look at real-time interaction management because right now it takes us 7 days to pick up on someone's behavior on the website and then follow up with email. And we'd like to get that more real time, so we think 3 days should do it. And I had your reaction because just before that, the call before that was with a big bank in the UK where they were talking to me about the 100 milliseconds of time they have to pick up a piece of data, get it from the Azure cloud over to the Google cloud, run a model using that data, get the score from the model, plug the score into a decision engine, and make something available on the website. So now there is the need for scientific real time in some cases, but not always. And right time is much more important, I think.
And I would assume that, as businesses evolve, there's more data, there's more real-time data. And bear with me, but this is where AI comes into play a little bit.
It does.
My one question on AI for you is more from a business perspective. How do you see, you talked about the role of AI for the marketer, the end result for the customer. What do businesses need to be doing today internally to prepare for that next generation of a marketer that is working with IT, working with AI? What does that look like, do you think? Well,
I think there's two things that you need to do today, and then there's the third thing, which will probably end up keeping us all awake at night as we worry about it. But number one, I think that with AI, it has to be from the bottoms up and from the top down, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and probably those of you who understand AI and what it can do from the bottoms up get a little bit frustrated with your management who might be saying, we need to get us one of those AIs, right? So we need some education at the top to understand where it fits and what it can do, and some executive support for that. But at the same time, from the bottoms up, the people who really get it and understand it need to help educate and spread that knowledge so that we can get better adoption. And then secondly, it's about the use cases. I think that almost everyone put their hands up yesterday when you were asked, are you using ChatGPT or one of the other capabilities? But when the question was then, are you paying for it? Only a few hands went up. And I think a lot of us are experimenting on our own, but when it comes to using it from a commercial perspective, we're expecting and waiting for Optimove to make it available as part of the software that we license from them. And I think that's the right thing to do, because we can depend on Optimove or our other vendors to have done some due diligence to make sure that it's safe, to make sure that it works, to make sure it doesn't hallucinate, and so forth. And so we should work with our suppliers to see what's available and when, and what are the use cases that will matter to us. And it might be a case that you work in a company where IT does a lot of its own development. That's fine. You could also work with IT as a supplier, but I think a lot of this is going to be from the commercial side. And then that longer term one, the one that will keep us awake at night, I think we are at an interesting crossroads here. Because on one hand, you can think that generative AI puts everything at everyone's fingertips in a way we didn't have before. We could search before and we could get a big answer set, and we would still have to then go into the answer set and figure out what it is we wanted. Whereas now we can ask questions. It becomes more conversational. But imagine if you are like me and you've got a Samsung refrigerator and you talk to Bixby in your kitchen because you get lonely. If I said to Bixby, hey Bixby, can you bring me up a recipe for chocolate cake? And Bixby says, I'd be happy to do that, Rusty, right after this ad. Or Bixby only recommends products and ingredients for my recipe from a certain supermarket or a certain consumer goods company because they happen to pay Samsung to be part of an ad network. I would hate that world. I think we'd all hate that world. But we have to think about, how do we as brands work with the big tech giants to ensure that we don't end up with Gen AI just in some weird way recreating that pay-to-play model that we have today with digital advertising. And I think that's something that we can all think about and impact, and I would urge you all to be thinking about that for your brands.
That's great. Last question for you. So we've heard a lot this week, or these past few days, it feels like a week, so much information. Things from yourself, from Peony, from Shai, from Neil, all these great sessions, all this content. And I know for myself, when I go to events like this, I leave thinking, wow, I want to do it all. I want to start this right now. From your perspective, what is the next best action for this audience as they go back to the office tomorrow, or like some of us on Monday?
Yeah, well, as much as we'd all like to think that our tech environment is a green field and we can just go plant whatever we'd like, that's not the case, obviously. We all have a lot of investments that are in place. Some of them are brilliant, like Optimove, and we can't live without it. Others, of course, may not be performing, or the vendor's going through a transition or whatever. So we all have an ecosystem that exists. So I think the first thing you can do, from just specific to this session, is look at your MarTech ecosystem, invite your best friend from IT to look at it with you, and figure out what's working and what's not, and what would it look like if you wanted to realize your customer obsession strategy, and then put that down. Just capture that in something, and then work toward it. So I think that would be the big step, instead of just going back and getting busy with the day job and executing campaigns the way you've always done it.
Yeah, think outside the box, reinvent, connect. Thank you, Rusty, so much for the time today.
Thank you, Ben.
Now,
Pleasure.